Stamatis responds back with e5. Knight comes out to f3. Knight c6. One of the things that has been absolutely admirable about Divya, the Ruy Lopez on the board, is the fact that she comes back every single day and plays fighting chess. So here there are no easy opponents in this tournament. Bishop a4. And now Stamatis brings out his knight to f6, attacking the pawn on e4. Divya goes for the main line. She castles and presses the clock. And many ways to play here. Bishop e7 is the closed Ruy Lopez. Bishop c5 is more active, but he goes for d6. Slightly lesser played move here. Rook e1, defending the pawn on e4, getting the rook into the game. And let's see how Stamatis continues. He goes bishop d7, breaking the pin here. And now white can generally push c3, d4. That's one way to play. The other is go directly perhaps d4. It's also a possibility. But Divya takes on c6. And the most natural move is to now take back bishop c6, attacking the pawn on e4. But Stamatis takes back with the pawn. B takes c6. And he does so, giving white a small edge here with a d4, which Divya instantly plays, and now posing a very tough question to black, because d takes e5 is possible. E takes d4 happens, and now you can take back with the knight, but you can also take back with the queen, which is what Divya has done. And a big threat now is to push the pawn to e5, breaking open the center. Stamatis pushes the queen back with c5, and now the queen comes back to d3. The queen is quite actively placed here. If you play bishop b5, I can go c4. He plays his bishop out to e7, and black is doing very well long term. If he can castle, maybe bishop c6, knight d7, but Divya is like, my friend, it's all about the initiative. I am attacking right here, right now, opens up the position with e5. Pawn takes e5, and you can already see how the pawns are all isolated. The bishop is attacked. Yes, you can castle here as black, but Stamatis goes bishop e6, trying to trade off the queens, and that would really help him, because once the queens are traded, his position would do pretty well. With her left hand, Divya goes queen g3, attacking the pawn on g7. Now you can castle here, but after knight c6 and taking on e7, white would be doing very well. So black here has an option, like castling seems okay, but bishop d6 is played. And it's a question now. Basically, you can't take here because of rook g8, and black is doing completely fine. He plays her knight out to c3. There is this nasty pin here. Still, if castling is done, there is bishop g5, but short castle seems the best. Instead, rook b8 played by Stamatis, and it's a mistake. Can Divya spot why this is wrong? This time, it's a much more tricky move to find. But the basic difference with the knight coming out on c3 is that the back rank is now safe. How is it safe? Imagine that I go now taking the pawn on g7. Like what? Oh, she does it. Queen g7 is the best move. And if I go rook g8, queen h6, then after bishop e5, rook e5, earlier there was a checkmate here, but with the knight defending this, there is no longer a checkmate. So queen g7, Stamatis does go rook g8, and now queen h6 is a good move, but there is also another amazing powerful move in this position. Let's see if Divya manages to spot it. Yes, she does. Knight takes f7. Incredible move here. The point being that if you take my queen, I take your queen, and eventually the bishop on e6 is hanging. So Divya Deshmukh here going in for the kill. Bishop takes pawn. Check. And if you take here, I'm not so sure what's happening. Actually, you can take it. Why not? King takes h2, taken here. And I think the main point, of course, is that black goes queen e7 and asks white, if you move your queen away, knight g4 is a check and you lose your queen. So the queen is actually trapped on g7. This is what Stamatis wanted to do, but Divya chops off the rook on g8, shaking her head. But actually, her position is amazing. Her position is amazing. She's won a piece, now a rook. So she has a rook and a piece for a queen. Knight takes, and if she wins another piece, she would be completely winning, which is what she does with knight g5. A beautiful move attacking this bishop, which cannot be saved easily. I guess the only move to save it is rook b6. That's what Stamatis does, rook b6. And Divya has to continue hacking here. And she finds another beautiful move, knight d5. The main point being, if you give a check, I'll go knight f4, blocking the check, and there's no way to save this bishop. So that's the reason why he takes, bishop takes d5, rook takes on e7, taken with a check, knight takes on e7. And now knight takes on h7, taken here. So Divya is 2 pawns up. And notice there's no check on h6 because the bishop covers that square. Beautifully played here by Divya Deshmukh. First sacrificing her queen, then getting back stuff. A double attack here on the knight and the pawn. So white may have to lose one of the pawns. Not really. Divya goes bishop g5. She continues her aggressive, uncompromising play. The knight is lost. But now rook e1. The knight is pinned here. It cannot be saved. The tactics still continuing, still flowing. You cannot take this pawn because of rook e7 check and you lose the bishop on h7. So bishop takes c2 makes all the sense. Rook takes on e7 check. If king d8, there is check and you lose the bishop. So king f8 is the only move to have to go to the other side. And now Divya takes the pawn on c7. The pawn on c5 is also attacked. Stamatis takes the pawn on b2 and Divya plays this very classy move, quickly a3. You will notice that even though in this position white is having these 2 extra pawns, one of the big problems that white faces is the opposite colored bishop position, and such positions are not so easy. Now bishop d3, defending this pawn, also attacking the f2 pawn. So you really don't want to take this and lose the f2 pawn. She gives a check. Bishop e7 check. King comes up to f7. And this is exactly what Divya had wanted. She can now pick up the c5 pawn and defend her f2 pawn. It then goes into a technical game where she has to convert her 2 extra pawns. How easy or difficult is that going to be is the question. We'll see. First the king comes up to e6. And now first king g3. She's slowly and steadily starting it off. Maybe king can go to f4, g4 and so on. So king comes up to f5. And Divya now thinking about what is the way to make progress. You know, you don't want to be pushing f3 because bishop f1 could become a problem here. She goes bishop to b4. Maybe wanting to just give a check, push the black king back and then start advancing her own king. So the bishop goes back to b5. And Divya gives check on f7. She plays this check. King comes back to e6. And rook to f8. The rook comes to a2. So black is keeping things under control for the time being. It's not so easy for white, but I believe one of the ways to do it could be to start moving the king up. Yeah, she goes king h4. Notice how the rook defends the pawn and she places her king on a dark square, so there are no checks from the bishop. And now she would like to push both of her pawns up the board. a5 played here. And for Divya, the question is whether to keep the bishop here and protect her pawn or to take it and trade pawns. Because now rook a3, Stamatis also gets the pawn back. Bishop comes to b6, defending the f2 pawn. And the bishop goes to c6, now attacking the g2 pawn. Maybe it's time to push g4, that's a good move. And Divya, I think, has accurately assessed that after rook f3 takes, this endgame is winning for her. So she decides to go into it. Bishop f3 played. And now the bishop comes back to e3, a strong move. If you play rook a4, trying to attack here, your bishop is hanging. So bishop d1, saving the bishop. And f4 played. What a nice tactical move. Because when you take here, there is a check and you lose the rook. And another beautiful aspect of this is that if you go king e7, I have bishop c5 check winning this rook. So her opponent goes rook c3. Maybe with the idea of king e7 attacking here and here. Divya now plays rook d8, another beautiful move, attacking the bishop. Again, rook e3 is met with check and you lose the rook, and the bishop is attacked. So goes bishop to c2. And now the bishop on e3 is hanging, so we need to protect it. Divya comes back and brings her king up. Oh, it's not hanging. Divya is super tactical again. Check and you lose. So king g5. Can you not go king e7 now? Yeah, he plays it king e7 so that if the rook is defended, the bishop is hanging. Let's see how Divya deals with this small problem. She goes rook d2 and she tells Stamatis, if you take the bishop, I'll take your bishop and I'll be 2 pawns up. So the bishop now comes to a4. Maybe it just wants to drop back to d7. And Divya brings her bishop up to d4. And now slowly with f5, f6, she's getting closer to making the pawn into the queen. Rook g3 played. And pawn to f5 pushed ahead. The pawn is moving forward. The bishop comes to c6, creating again a small threat with bishop f3 attacking bishop f3, and Divya goes bishop e5 attacking the rook on g3. Rook goes back to g1. And now bishop to h2 played. The rook is actually moved away from the g file. Stamatis goes rook f1. And there's still some technical difficulties to push the pawn. She goes king g6. And I guess the idea is if you give another check on e8, I'll move even further ahead with king g7. So bishop goes to d7. And now rook e2 check. King goes back to d8. And bishop to e5, just improving the position of the bishop. Difficult to push the g pawn. f5 is hanging, difficult to push the f pawn. g4 is hanging. So bishop goes to e8. And now king g7. In fact, the way in which Divya has played this game until now has been flawless. She hasn't made any errors. Bishop goes to d7. But it's just these final moments which are a bit tricky. It's not like very trivial to convert. The main point being that if black gets an opportunity to sack the bishop for 2 pawns, it would be a draw. So Divya rightly pins the bishop there. And now king e8 played. And there are many ways to win now. Rook d4 they runs into bishop f5, so you don't want to go there. But maybe bishop f6 seems like a good move. So you can't move the bishop. There's a checkmate on d8. And the other move, of course, is to push the pawn to f6, which is slightly tactical, and Divya finds it. The beauty of this is that when you take on g4, there's bishop c7 threatening a mate in 1, and when you block it, rook e2 makes you lose the bishop. And Divya finds this sequence, bishop g4, bishop c7, beautifully played by her. Just impeccable, and